The first thing you notice isn't the explosion, it's the silence. A profound, bottomless quiet that swallows the background hum of civilization whole. One moment the refrigerator is humming its endless, monotonous E-flat. The air conditioner is breathing its cool, mechanical sigh. The next, nothing. A silence so absolute it has a weight. It presses on your eardrums. You stand up. The lights are out. You check your phone. The screen's a dead black mirror reflecting a face that is just beginning to understand. No signal bar. The Wi-Fi icon is gone. You try to load a web page. The request times out. Forever. This is it. The end of the world as you know it. And you think you're ready. You have your bug-out bag. You have your cases of freeze-dried stroganoff. And you have your precious little box of radios you bought on sale last year. You've read all the blogs. You have a laminated card with all the important frequencies. You think you're going to be the new node of information in a shattered world. What a quaint and catastrophically stupid delusion. You probably imagine yourself on day 5, sitting in your darkened living room, the hero of your own little post-apocalyptic movie. You pull out that shiny Baofeng UV5R, the Swiss Army knife of clueless preppers. You've got the extended battery, the whip antenna, the whole 9 yards. Your plan, such as it is to tune to FRS channel 1 to check on your neighbor, then switch to your local repeater frequency to coordinate with your mutual assistance group. A handful of other suburban dads you met online who all bought the same tactical gear. Reality check. Your plan is a joke, and the punchline is your own slow, lonely demise. You think you're going to coordinate a defense? You think you're going to share information? You're going to be lucky if you can hear the man 2 houses down crying for help before your battery dies. In a crisis, radios provide a lifeline, enabling you to receive important updates, but only if you know what you are actually doing. Bestham Radio, besthamradio.com, our radio survivalists and preppers. Let's talk microphysics for a moment, because your grand strategy is about to collide with some elementary principles you conveniently ignored. Those FRS and GMRS radios operate on UHF frequencies, which are, for all practical purposes, line of sight. That signal doesn't magically curve around the curvature of the Earth or punch through dense buildings. It travels in a straight line until it hits something. In the pristine, flat world of the user manual, you might get a few miles. In your neighborhood, with its houses, trees, and hills, your 5-watt signal is going to be absorbed, reflected, and scattered into uselessness within a few blocks. And your repeater? That magical tower on a hill that extends your range? It's an electronic device that relies on the power grid. When the grid goes down, it switches to a battery backup. Those batteries, under constant load from a dozen panicked people all trying to talk at once, will be drained in hours. Without a dedicated team with fuel, parts, and a technical expertise to keep it running, that repeater is just a very tall, very useless metal sculpture. You're not a radio operator. You're a child with a walkie-talkie, and the universe does not care about your aspirations. Creek Stewart, HTTP number www.creekstewart.com, Daddy to Creek Stewart, survival, the lifeline when everything else fails, Baofeng, radios for survival communication. So here's the horror you've earned. It's day 8. The batteries on your primary radio are dead. You're conserving the last one. You haven't heard a single friendly voice. The FRS channels are silent. The GMRS channels are silent. The repeater frequency is just a wash of static. The comforting illusions of a network, of support, of being anything other than completely and utterly alone, has evaporated. The silence you first notice is no longer just outside. It's inside your head. It is the sound of your isolation. Every creak of the floorboards in your house is a potential threat you can't verify. Every distant shout is a mystery you can't solve. You are blind and deaf beyond the walls of your own home. Your meticulous plan, your laminated card of frequencies, your entire concept of post-collapse survival has failed its first and most basic test. You focused on talking when you should have been focused on listening, not to people but to the planet, to the very physics of the atmosphere. There is a signal out there, a single frequency that holds more value than all the panicked chatter of a dying society. But you have to know what it is, and more importantly, what it means. Creek Stewart, creekstewart.com, Creek Stewart, survival the lifeline. when everything else fails. Baofeng radios for the survival communication. So let's say you're a step above the Baofeng brigade. You have a proper shortwave receiver. You think you're going to bypass the local chaos and tap into global information. You have this fantasy of tuning into a ham radio net, a community of grizzled, experienced operators coordinating relief efforts and sharing vital news. Or perhaps you'll tune to a major international broadcaster and get the official story. Reality check. The official story is a lie, and your ham radio buddies are ringing the dinner bell for every predator within 1,000 miles. What news do you expect to hear? A calm, reassuring voice telling you that everything is under control? In a world where the internet has died forever, under control is not a phrase in anyone's vocabulary. Any broadcast station powerful enough to reach you is run by a government, and their news will be pure propaganda, designed to manage the panic of the dying, not to give you actionable intelligence. Moonraker Online. Cheetah HTTPS is nowhere. Moonrakeronline.com. Blog. Joining Jadin Hamian Blake Nice Search Radio for Preppers Survival Beginner's Guide. Now let's talk about those ham radio nets from a scientific perspective. Ever hear of Dunbar's number? It's a concept from anthropology suggesting a cognitive limit to the number of people with whom one can maintain stable social relationships. That number is about 150. Your prepper net trying to coordinate hundreds or thousands of people across a continent is a sociological impossibility, but it's worse than that. It's a tactical nightmare. The beauty and the curse of shortwave radio is skywave propagation. The signal from your radio bounces off the ionosphere, a layer of charged particles in the upper atmosphere, and comes back down thousands of miles away. You're not just talking to your friend in the next state, you're broadcasting your existence, your capabilities, and your presumed resources to everyone on the continent who has a receiver. You are a lighthouse for the desperate. You are a voice in the dark saying, I have food, I have power. I have things you want. And in a world without rules, there are people with the technology, very simple technology, by the way, called radio direction finding, who will follow that signal right to your front door. Imagine the scene. A small, well-intentioned group of survivors has established a network. They use their ham radios to check in, to trade information about clean water sources, to feel a flicker of community in the overwhelming darkness. One night, the designated net controller, a man named Dave, is trying to arrange a trade, medical supplies for spare solar panel parts. He's on the 40-meter band, feeling proud of his service. What he doesn't know is that 300 miles away, a much more pragmatic group has been monitoring that same frequency. They don't talk. They just listen. Using 2 receivers, they get a bearing on Dave's signal. The next day, they use a different listening post and get another bearing. Where those lines cross on a map, that's Dave's house. To them, his signal isn't a call for community, it's an inventory list. 2 weeks later, Dave's broadcast is abruptly cut off mid-sentence. His community hears nothing. They call for him, but the only answer is static. The hard, complex reality is that broadcasting your voice is a liability. The real solution is to listen, not to a person, but to a pulse. A constant, reliable scientific signal that tells you about the state of the world itself. This brings us to the only frequency you actually need, the steady metronomic heartbeat of station WWV. You're probably thinking, WWV, the time station. You're telling me the most important frequency in the apocalypse is a talking clock. That is the kind of simplistic thinking that gets you killed. Reality check. If you think WWV is just a clock, you don't deserve to survive the first winter. You are listening for the time. I am listening for the subtle fluctuations in the carrier signal that tell me the state of the ionosphere. You hear a voice say, at the tone, coordinated universal time will be 14 hours, 20 minutes. And I hear proof that a highly complex, technologically advanced facility, deep in the heart of the North American continent, is still operational, still powered, and still maintained by a competent engineering staff. Its existence is a vital sign for civilization itself. Listening to WWV is not about telling time, it's about reading the physics of the planet to gain a supreme tactical advantage. The broadcasts are vital for understanding and predicting weather and climate, which suddenly become the most important factors in your life. Prevention Web, Dojos, www.preventionweb.net, news, Jottage Radio, Frequencies are vital weather water, and climate monitoring and prediction. Let's dive into the real science. WWWV broadcasts simultaneously on multiple frequencies, 2.5, 5, 10, 15, and 20 MHz. These are not random choices. They are a sounding board for the ionosphere. This layer of the atmosphere, which enables all long-distance radio communication, is in constant flux, energized and distorted by radiation from the sun. During the day, lower frequencies are absorbed and higher frequencies are passed. At night, the dynamic flips. By systematically tuning through the WWWV frequencies, you can determine which bands are open. You are not guessing. You are gathering empirical data on the maximum usable frequency, MUF. Knowing the MUF is like having a weather forecast for the radio waves. It tells you what is possible, but it's the data encoded in the broadcast that's the real gold. At 18 minutes past every hour, a voice reads out the previous day's solar flux index, A index, and K index. To you, that's just a string of numbers. To someone who is prepared, that is a direct report on the sun's activity and its effect on Earth's geomagnetic field. It's your only early warning for a geomagnetic storm that could induce currents capable of frying your last remaining electronics. Now for the horror of ignorance, imagine two survivors, a father and his daughter. The father's trying to reach his brother 1,500 miles away. He has a powerful shortwave radio and knows his brother is listening on an agreed-upon frequency. He spends every evening, night after night, calling out, sending his voice into the static. He hears nothing back. He tries for weeks. His voice gets more desperate. The silence on the other end is absolute. He finally collapses in despair, convinced his brother is dead, that they are the last ones left. He gives up. The horror is this. His brother was alive the whole time, listening. But the father was broadcasting on the 20-meter band at night during a period of low solar activity. The physics of the ionosphere at that moment made communication on that frequency impossible. The signal was going straight up into space. If he had just spent 10 minutes listening to WWV, he would have known the 20-meter band was dead, but that the 80-meter band was wide open. His ignorance didn't just lead to a failed call. It led to a failure of hope, the most critical resource of all. The ultimate solution isn't just to have a radio, it is to have the scientific literacy to use it. You must monitor WWWV not for the time, but for the data. You log the solar flux. You chart which frequencies are strong at what times. You use this to build a model of the radio environment. This tells you when to listen, and if you must transmit, when and how. And most importantly, that steady rhythmic tick of the WDWV clock is your canary in the coal mine. The day you tune to 2.5, 5, 10, 15, and 20 Inderos mineral ends and hear nothing. That is the day you know the last bastion of complex order has fallen. The silence of that one specific station is the most terrifying broadcast of all. It is the true sound of the end of the world. Let's move to the next catastrophic error in your mental model. You've accepted that you need radios. You've bought a pack of those bubble pack walkie-talkies from a sporting goods store for your family. You see a feature on the box that says 121 privacy codes, or sub-channels for secure communication. You think, perfect, I'll put my family on channel 4 code 12, and nobody will be able to hear us planning our escape route. You believe you have created a private, encrypted tunnel through the chaos. The mockery. This is adorable. It really is. You think a $30 plastic toy has military-grade encryption? You think privacy code means private? In the brutal lexicon of survival, privacy code is a marketing term for ignorance filter. By using these codes, you aren't locking anyone out of your conversation. You're simply locking yourself into a padded room where you can't hear the wolves howling outside. You are voluntarily deafening yourself to the threats around you while screaming your location into anyone with an IQ higher than room temperature. The science. Let's break down the physics of CTCSS, continuous tone-coded squelch system, and DCS, digital coded squelch. That is what those privacy codes actually are. When you select code 12, your radio adds a sub-audible tone, a low-frequency hum, usually below the range of human hearing, say 100.0 Hz, to your voice transmission. The receiving radio is set to listen for that specific hum. If it hears the hum, it unmutes the speaker and lets the audio through. If it doesn't hear the hum, It stays silent. Do you understand what that means? It is a filter for your ears, not a scrambler for the airwaves. Your voice is still being broadcast in clear, unencrypted analog FM modulation on the main frequency. Anyone, literally anyone, who has their radio set to monitor, which turns off the filter, or who has a radio without these codes enabled, hears everything you say perfectly clearly. You are standing in a crowded stadium shouting through a megaphone, but you've put earplugs in your own ears so you can only hear your friends. You think you're whispering in a library. In reality, you are broadcasting your supply inventory to the armed gang 3 blocks away who are scanning the open channels. The horror imagine. It's day 14. Resources are scarce. Desperation has set in. You are using your private channel to coordinate a scavenging run with your son. Dad, I found a garage with gas cans, he says on channel 4 code 12. You reply, good job, stay there, I'm coming with the truck. You feel safe. You hear no static, no interference, no other voices. Silence feels like security. Meanwhile, a mile away, a group of raiders is sitting around a campfire with a simple Uniden scanner, or even a cheap Baofeng set to scan mode with no tones enabled. They don't hear the silence you hear. They hear everything. Garage with gas cans. Coming with the truck. They don't need to break a code. They don't need a hacker. They just needed to not be gullible enough to believe the text on a blister pack. They look at a map. They know where the garages are. They get there 5 minutes before you do. When you pull up, you aren't met with your son and gas cans. You are met with the muzzle flash of a rifle you never saw coming, directed by intelligence you freely provided. The solution. The only true privacy is silence. But since you must communicate, you need to understand the difference between obscurity and security. If you have the budget and the technical skill, you move to digital radios with AES 256 encryption, real mathematical scrambling that turns your voice into digital noise without the key. But let's be real, you probably don't have those. And if you do, you probably didn't manage the keys correctly. So, the low-tech solution? Brevity codes and one-time pads. Never say gas, say item alpha. Never say garage, say location 3. But even that is dangerous because traffic analysis, the mere volume of transmission, tells an enemy something is happening. The ultimate solution is the burst transmission concept. You write down your message, you condense it, you transmit for 3 seconds only, then you move. You never transmit from your base. You treat every press of the PTT, push-to-talk button, as if you are firing a flare gun into the night sky, because electromagnetically, that is exactly what you are doing. Transition to next phase. Now that we've shattered your faith in your equipment's privacy, let's look at your next illusion, the belief that you will be able to listen to the police and emergency services to stay one step ahead of the chaos. You think you'll just turn on your scanner and listen to the dispatchers send units to the riot zones so you can go the other way. The Delusion, Part 3. You picture yourself like Batman in his cave, surrounded by screens, listening to the police frequency. Attention all units looting in Sector 7. You nod sagely and mark your map. You think the government infrastructure will remain transparent and accessible to you, the taxpayer, even as society crumbles. The science and the mockery. Let's talk about P25 Phase 2 trunking systems. Most modern public safety communications are not simple frequency A talks to frequency B systems anymore. They are complex computer networks where frequencies are hopped hundreds of times a second, assigned dynamically by a control channel. To listen, you need a digital trunking scanner that costs more than your car. But it gets worse. In a real SHT as if when shit hits the fan scenario, do you know what the first thing the comms commander does? They flip the switch to encrypted. It's a standard protocol for tactical operations. Even if you have that $600 scanner, all you will hear is digital garble. Or worse, silence. The police aren't going to broadcast their vulnerabilities to the mob. They will go dark. The horror, Part 3. You're relying on that scanner for your situational awareness. You hear silence on the police bands. You interpret this as everything is calm. You think, the police aren't saying anything, so the riots must have died down. You pack your bag and head out. The reality? The police are in the middle of a full-scale firefight 2 streets over, coordinating on an encrypted tactical channel you can't hear. You walk right into a kill zone because you mistook lack of data for safety. You relied on a system designed to exclude you. The solution, part 3, stop trying to listen to the people who are hiding from you. Start listening to the people who can't hide. Monitor the unencrypted frequencies of the infrastructure that is too old or too unimportant to upgrade. Business bands, MERS die dot. The truck drivers, the warehouse workers, the hotel security staff, they don't have encryption. When the hotel security guard screams that the lobby is being breached, you know the riot is moving downtown. Marine VHF, if coastal. Boat captains are chatty and possess grand views of the coastline. They will report fires and troop movements long before CNN does. Amateur radio 2-meter simplex, 146 25 28 now. This is where the other panicked civilians are. They are your sensor network. They are the ones screaming. They are burning the houses on Main Street. You build your intelligence picture from the bottom up, from the raw panic of the unencrypted masses, not from the top-down silence of the authorities. You become an aggregator of chaos. That is how you see the battlefield. Now let's talk about your favorite fetish object. The tactical antenna screwed under your cheap handheld like some kind of magic wand that bends physics in your favor. You saw a video where a guy in camo told you to upgrade the stock antenna, and you sprinted to buy a longer, edgier-looking rubber stick with a cool brand name on it, convinced you just doubled your range and turned your toy into a military-grade instrument of survival. In your head, you imagine yourself on a ridge, whispering into the mic and being heard 50 kilometers away, because the Amazon description mentioned up to 50-kilometer line of sight, in fine print written by a marketing intern who has never seen a radio outside of a car stereo. Some more sober people already tried to explain to beginners that in real terrain, hills, buildings, forests, the practical range of these handhelds is only a few kilometers at best, but you heard 5W, saw the number, and your brain clicked straight to superhero mode. You didn't actually bother to learn how antennas work, because learning is hard, and buying is easy. Here's the reality check, delivered in the language of electromagnetic physics. A radio signal is not a beam of power you shove into the sky with brute force watts. It is an oscillating electromagnetic field with a specific wavelength, and your antenna is a resonant structure that either cooperates with that wavelength or sabotages it. For VHF at around 146 MHz, the wavelength is roughly 2 meters. A quarter of that, about 50 centimeter, is a classic efficient radiator length, which is why decent field antennas are roughly that size, or are cleverly folded or coiled to emulate it. Your cute 10-15 centimeter rubber duck is, in practice, a fat, lossy inductor that mostly converts your precious battery power into heat and near-field garbage that never leaves your immediate area. People who actually test these things find that a properly sized external wire or whip, mounted high and in the clear, dramatically improves reception and range compared to stock or tactical stubs, because you are finally giving the wave something close to the geometry it needs to form a real far-field pattern. And then terrain steps in. VHF and UHF are mostly line of sight. Trees, hills, and buildings scatter, absorb, and block your signal, which is why serious survival radio advice emphasizes using different bands and antenna setups for open terrain versus dense urban environments, instead of pretending one magic stick does it all. Picture the horror scene woven out of these little sins of ignorance. It's day 11. Your group has split. Half of you are in a temporary shelter near a river. The others are scouting closer to the town edge. You're on handhelds with upgraded antennas you proudly installed, feeling like professionals. The town group spots something bad, an armed convoy rolling slowly through the outskirts, stopping at each visible farmhouse. They try to warn you. Their radios scream into the ether, but your antenna, the one you bought because it looked professional, is inside a concrete building near ground level, electrically mismatched to the frequency, and pointed sideways, both figuratively and literally. You hear nothing. The inverse is just as bad. You stand outside, calling them, hearing them faintly because their antenna has at least some clear path to you, but they do not hear you back, because your transmission power is being murdered at the antenna, reflected back into the radio, or burned as heat instead of radiating as a clean, efficient wave. The asymmetry kills coordination. One side thinks the other is ignoring them. The other side thinks the radio is just quiet today. By the time the convoy reaches your stretch of road, you're still on the porch arguing about who forgot to charge which battery. You didn't lose because you lacked a radio. You lost because you disrespected the physics of antennas, and the universe collects that debt in blood. The ugly solution is that you have to stop treating the antenna as an accessory and start treating it as the primary weapon system. That means stringing up an ugly, obvious piece of wire in a tree for HF, or a simple half-wave or a quarter-wave vertical for VHF, even if it ruins the aesthetic of your low-profile camp, because every meter of height and every centimeter of correct length multiplies your effective reach. Survival-oriented radio practitioners repeatedly point out that even a very simple, improvised long wire, properly elevated and matched, turns a mediocre transceiver into a continent-spanning ear, which is why practical guides for preppers emphasize external antennas and tuning over raw transmitter power. In the VHF, WAAF world, that means a proper length whip or a homemade ground plane antenna you toss on a metal roof or lash to a pole, rather than hoping a stubby duck in your pocket will magically punch through buildings. In AAF, it means learning how to deploy a 20-40 meter wire, sloping or horizontal, to exploit the ionospheric sky wave instead of screaming into dead air. You stop pressing the PTT from inside basements and cars, and start using your brain. Step outside, get elevation, get clear of metal clutter, and use the environment as part of your system instead of a random backdrop. And this is where the earlier point about WWV and propagation loops back in. If you know from listening to that cold, indifferent time signal which bands are alive, then your antenna choice becomes a scalpel instead of a club. If the ionospheric conditions tell you that 7 milliards is open at night, you don't waste energy yelling into 20 meters with a mismatched piece of wire. You cut and hang the length of conductor that turns your campsite into a proper radiator for that specific band, and ride the physics like a current instead of fighting it. In practice, that means your only frequency you monitor is not a magic talisman. It's the reference point that tells you how to reshape your hardware, your antennas, your expectations, your habits, into a system that uses the atmosphere as an ally. You are not listening to a clock. You are interrogating the sky about its current mood, then carving your antennas accordingly. Everyone else is busy shouting, "Can anyone hear me?" into a dead band with a decorative rubber stick. You, if you deserve to live, are up in the dark, in the rain, hands numb, throwing another length of wire over a higher branch, watching the S-meter climb as the noise floor drops and distant voices finally cut through the hiss. That is the difference between a prepper with gear and a survivor with understanding. Script Part 3, the physics of frequency and the tactical spectrum. We've established that your privacy is a lie and your antenna is a toy. Now let's talk about the electromagnetic spectrum itself. You think all frequencies are created equal. You think 146 megahertz is the same as 440 megahertz, just a different number on the dial. This lack of nuance is why you will be deaf when it matters. The delusion. You have a dual-band radio. You think, I have VHF and UHF, I'm covered. You use UHF because the antenna is shorter and looks cooler. You try to talk to your scout team 2 miles away in dense woods using 440 megahertz. You hear static. You panic. You assume the radio is broken. The science. Let's do some wave propagation of physics. VHF, very high frequency, 254 megahertz, has a wavelength of about 2 meters. UHF, ultra high frequencies, radio 440 MHz, has a wavelength of about 70 centimeters. TechShack, https techshack.com. These are pages dear mastering amateur radio bands. A comprehensive guide 1. Here's the rule of thumb you ignored. Frequency interacts with matter based on wavelength size. UHF, 70 MHz. The wavelength is short. It loves to bounce off hard, flat surfaces like concrete, steel, and glass. It penetrates windows well. It is the king of urban environments. But in a forest? That 70 centimeter wave hits a pine needle, a branch, a trunk, and it scatters. The moisture in the leaves absorbs it. Trying to use UHF in the woods is like trying to shine a flashlight through a brick wall. The forest eats your signal. Striker radios, strikerradios.com, de ham radios, ham, and radio emergency frequencies, common uses. VHF, the wavelength is longer. It bends slightly better around obstacles. It punches through foliage with less absorption than UHF. It is the king of rural, juicio outdoor environments. Striker radios, HPD name, strikerradios.com, .derm ham radios, .ham radio, emergency frequencies as common uses. The horror. It's day 20. You are in the woods, running from a wildfire or a hostile group. You are using UHF because that's what you left the radio on. You are screaming for help to your base camp 3 miles away. They have a clear line of sight, but there's a dense stand of wet pine trees between you. Your signal is being shredded by the foliage. You die of smoke inhalation or exposure, clutching a radio that was working perfectly, but was tuned to a frequency that physics had already condemned to death. Meanwhile, if you had simply pressed the band button to switch to VHF, your signal would have diffracted around the trees and reached camp loud and clear. Ignorance of wavelength properties is a death sentence. The solution: urban indoors. Use UHF. GMRS. It bounces down hallways and penetrates drywall. Rural shore forest. Use VHF. It survives the trees. The line of sight lie. You think a line of sight means, if I can see it, I can talk to it. Wrong. Visual horizon is about 3 miles for a person standing on flat ground. Radio horizon is slightly further, maybe 4 miles, because radio waves bend slightly. But you are forgetting the Fresnel zone. This is a football-shaped area of space between your antenna and the receiver's antenna. If this zone is cluttered, even if you can technically see the other person through a gap in the trees, your signal is degraded. Physics demands not just a line, but a volume of clear space. If you don't have that, you don't have a signal, you have noise. Now let's escalate. You've mastered the handhelds. You haven't, but let's pretend. You've set up a base station. You have a high-frequency HF transceiver that cost you $2,000. You've read that HF is the king of distance. You fantasize about sitting in your bunker, broadcasting your manifesto to the world, coordinating with other resistance cells in the next state. The delusion. You dial in 14.2 at 50 MHz, 20-meter band. You key the mic. CQ. CQ. This is Warlord Alpha calling for assistance in the tri-state area. You feel powerful. You are throwing your voice thousands of miles. You think your friends in the next county, 50 miles away, can hear you loud and clear. The mockery. You are shouting over their heads. Literally. You are performing the radio equivalent of trying to pass a note to the person sitting next to you by throwing it into orbit. You are loud in Moscow. You are loud in Tokyo. But in the town 50 miles away, where the supply depot is, you are non-existent. You are a ghost, the science. This is the physics of the skip zone, or the zone of silence. When you transmit on a typical AF frequency like 14 MHz with a standard antenna, your signal shoots off the wire at a low angle, say 10 to 20 degrees above the horizon, and travels through the atmosphere, hits the F layer of the ionosphere, and bounces back down to Earth. But geometry is a cruel mistress. Because of that takeoff angle, the signal doesn't touch the ground again for maybe 800 to 1,500 miles. The area between where your ground wave dies out, about 15-20 miles, and where your sky wave first lands, 800 plus miles, is the skip zone. Anyone inside that zone, which is exactly where 99% of the people who can actually help you or hurt you are located, hears absolutely nothing. You are skipping over your reality to talk to a fantasy. The horror. It's day 30. The local warlord is closing in. You need backup from the militia group 2 counties over, about 80 miles away. You know they have radios. You know they are listening. And you start transmitting on 20 meters, the long-range band. You scream for hours. We are under attack. Sector 4, need immediate support. In a basement in Prague, a teenager hears you perfectly. He logs your call sign. Wow, strong signal from America, he thinks, and goes back to eating his canned beans. But the militia 80 miles away? Silence. They are in your skip zone. They assume you are already dead because you haven't checked in. They don't launch the rescue mission. You're overrun and killed while your voice is booming crystal clear in a radio shack in New Zealand. You died because you didn't understand trigonometry. The solution. The solution is NVIS, Near Vertical Incidence Skywave. This is the secret weapon of jungle warfare and disaster relief, and it is the only way to cover that deadly 0 to 300 mile gap. You have to stop trying to shoot the signal out and start shooting it up. Straight up. You want to blast your signal at a 90-degree angle, directly into the ionosphere, directly above your head. If the frequency is low enough, usually 4 millisecond meshes to 8 nanometers, the 80-meter or 40-meter bands, the ionosphere won't reflect it forward. It will reflect it straight back down, like a shower head spraying water over a tub. This creates an umbrella of communications. It rains your signal down over a 300-mile radius, filling in the deep valleys, the other side of the mountains, and the dense forests where line of sight fails. There is no skip zone. Everyone from 0 to 300 miles hears you. But you can't do this with your fancy vertical antenna. Vertical antennas suppress high-angle radiation. To do NVIS, you need a low horizontal dipole wire. And I mean low. 10 to 15 feet off the ground. Yes, the manuals tell you higher is better. For DX, long distance, yes. For survival, no. You want that wire low so the ground reflection pushes the signal straight up. You need to build a cloud burner. While the clueless preppers are trying to talk to Europe, you are building a localized, inescapable dome of communication over your region. You are the spider in the center of the web, and they are just shouting at the moon. You've got your NVIS antenna. You've got your band plan. You feel like a communications god, but you've forgotten the fuel that powers the engine. You're obsessing over the car while the gas tank is leaking. You think electricity is something you can just harvest like berries from a bush. The delusion. I have a solar panel, you declare. I have a 20-watt fold-out panel I bought on Amazon and a USB power bank. I am energy independent. You picture yourself unfolding this little panel on a rock, plugging in your radio and basking in free, limitless energy from the sun. The mockery. Oh, you sweet summer child. You think the sun is your friend? The sun is an unreliable, intermittent nuclear reactor that hates your cheap electronics. That 20-watt panel? That's the rating under standard test conditions. A laboratory setting with 1,000 watts per square meter of light at 25 degrees Celsius. In the real world, it's cloudy, it's winter, the sun is at a low angle, there is dust on the panel. You're getting 3 watts, maybe 5. Your radio draws 1.5 amps on transmit. Your panel's providing 0.3 amps. Do the math. You are bleeding power every time you key the mic. You're essentially trying to fill a swimming pool with a thimble, while a hole in the bottom drains it with a fire hose. The science. Let's talk about Puchert's law and internal resistance. You're probably using lead acid or cheap lithium-ion batteries. When you transmit, you pull a high current surge. Batteries hate surges. If you pull current too fast, the effective capacity of the battery drops. A 10 amp hour battery might only give you 6 amp hours if you drain it quickly. And then there's the false peak of solar charging. Your cheap charge controller sees the voltage spike when the sun comes out and thinks the battery is full. It cuts off the charge, but the battery is only surface charged. The moment you put a load on it, the voltage collapses. You are operating on ghost power. The horror. It's day 45. Deep winter. The sky has been gray for a week. Your little solar panel is useless. Your primary battery is dead. You switch to your backup, a stash of alkaline AA batteries you saved for emergencies. You put them in the battery case. You turn on the radio. It lights up. You are saved. You press the PTT button to answer a distress call. The screen flickers and dies. Why? Because alkaline batteries have high internal resistance. They can run a flashlight for hours, but the moment you demand the 1.5 amps needed for a radio transmission, the voltage sags instantly below the cutoff threshold. The radio reboots. You try again. Reboot. You can hear people, but you cannot speak. You're gagged by chemistry. You watch the last bar of power to fade on the screen, realizing that your energy independence was a marketing lie. The solution. Overkill is underrated. You don't need a 20-watt panel. You need a 100-watt rigid panel minimum. You need to harvest 300% of your daily needs in the 4 hours of good sun you might get. LiFePO4 chemistry, lithium iron phosphate. It's heavy, it's expensive, but it has a flat discharge curve. It gives you 12.8 volts until it dies. It doesn't care about surges. It doesn't explode like Leon. It is the only battery for the apocalypse. The QRP discipline. Stop transmitting at 50 watts. Turn your power down. Learn to communicate with 5 watts. Every watt you save is an hour of life. Monitor voltage, not bars. Ignore the battery icon on your screen. It lies. Use a multimeter. Know the precise voltage of your system. 12.0 V on a lead-acid battery means it's basically empty. 50%? If you don't know that, you are killing your battery every time you use it. Now that we've secured your power, hopefully, let's talk about what you are sending. You are obsessed with voice. You want to hear a human being. You want to talk. This emotional need is a tactical failure. Voice is the most inefficient, power-hungry, and insecure mode of communication in existence. The delusion. You want to have a conversation. Over and out. Roger that. You think you're in a movie. You spend 5 minutes describing a map coordinate. Okay, go past the red barn, then turn left at the big oak tree. The mockery. While you're waxing poetic about barns and trees, your signal is fading. The static is eating your words. The other guy hears, go past the static and turn static or tree. He asks you to repeat. You repeat. You use up double the battery. You stay on the air twice as long, giving the direction finders a perfect fix on your location. You are loud, dumb, and slow. The science enter JS8 call in the digital modes. This is where the true survivors live. Voice requires a high signal-to-noise ratio, SNR. You need a strong signal to be understood. Digital modes like JS8 call or even humble CW, Morse code, can decode signals that are buried in the noise. A computer or a trained ear can pull a message out of static that sounds like pure silence to the human ear. Furthermore, digital text is precise. You don't describe a location. You send a GPS string. It takes 2 seconds. It is error-free. It is compressed. The horror. It's day 60. You're trying to guide a medical team to your location. Your friend is bleeding out. The storm is raging. The radio band is noisy. You scream the coordinates into the mic. 3, 4.5. The static crashes. They miss a number. They ask for a repeat. You scream it again. They write it down wrong. They go down the wrong hill. Your friend dies because an S sounded like an F in the static. The solution. If you had a tablet connected to your radio running JS8 call, you would have typed the message. You would have hit send. The computer would have turned that text into a series of musical tones. The receiving computer would have decoded it perfectly, even if the signal was so weak human ears couldn't hear it. The message appears on their screen. Medevac reckon in GPS, 34.567, 88.1123. Severe bleeding. No ambiguity, no repetition. Minimum battery usage, maximum stealth. Stop talking, start typing. The future of survival is not a voice in the dark. It is a line of text on a glowing screen. The final lesson. For now, we have covered the physics of silence, the lie of privacy, the geometry of antennas, the chemistry of batteries, and the efficiency of digital code. But the most important lesson is this. The radio is not a magic box. It is a scientific instrument. It demands respect. It demands knowledge. It demands that you stop buying solutions and start learning physics. The internet is gone. The easy answers are gone. All that is left is the electromagnetic spectrum and your ability to manipulate it. Tune in, listen, survive, or don't. The ionosphere doesn't care. End of transmission. You are feeling confident now. You have your NVIS antenna, your battery bank, your digital modes. You think you are a ghost. You send your messages, feeling slick and secretive, but you are making a fatal assumption. You assume that just because you can't see the enemy can't see you. The delusion. I'll keep my transmission short, you say. I'll use a pseudonym. Nobody knows I'm here. You think radio anonymity works like internet anonymity. You think your location is private unless you say it out loud. The mockery. This is the thinking of a child playing hide-and-seek who covers their eyes and thinks they are invisible. In the radio spectrum, you are not a ghost. You are a flare. Every time you press that PTT button, you are igniting a massive electromagnetic beacon that radiates from your location at the speed of light. You don't need to say your address. Your signal is your address. The science. Let's talk about TDOA, time difference of arrival, and Doppler shift. Serious adversaries, and even smart raider groups with stolen commercial gear, Use radio direction finding, RDF. They have 3 receivers spread out over a few miles. When your signal hits receiver A, then receiver B, then receiver C, there's a microscopic time delay between each hit. Simple trigonometry calculates your exact grid coordinate instantly. And for the lone wolves, a simple fox hunting loop antenna can tell a user the bearing of your signal. One guy gets a bearing from the north, another gets a bearing from the east. Where those 2 lines cross on the map, that is where you are sleeping. And don't forget RF fingerprinting. Every radio transmitter has a unique turn-on transient signature, like a fingerprint. Even if you change your call sign, even if you change your voice, the physics of your oscillator identifies you as the same target. The horror. It's day 75. You are smart. You never say your location. You only transmit for 10 seconds at a time, but you transmit every day at 6 Cadiz p.m. A group of bandits has been plotting the bearings of a mystery signal for a week. They don't know who you are, and they don't care. They just see a persistent signal source in grid square 44. They assume where there is a radio, there is food. You're sitting down to dinner, feeling secure. You hear a twig snap. You realize too late that while you were broadcasting to the world, you were guiding the sharks right to your boat. The breach charge on your front door is the last thing you hear. The solution displacement never ever transmit from your base. Run a long feed line, coax, so the antenna is 100 meters away from your bunker. Or better yet, hike to a transmission hill 2 miles away, send your traffic, and then leave immediately. Directional antennas. Use a Yagi beam antenna. Point it away from the threat and towards your friend. This focuses your energy in a narrow beam, reducing the chance of being heard by listeners on your flanks or rear. Power discipline. Use the absolute minimum power needed. If 1 watt works, do not use 5 watts. 5 watts makes you a bigger target. Now let's address the boogeyman, the EMP, electromagnetic pulse, or the CME, coronal mass ejection. The event that fries the grid instantly. You think you were ready because you watched a YouTube video. The delusion? I wrap my spare radio in aluminum foil, you say proudly. I put it inside my microwave ammo can garbage bin. It's safe. You treat EMP protection like leftovers you're saving for later. The mockery. Your microwave is designed to keep 2.4 GHz waves in to cook your burrito. It is not designed to keep a high field strength broadband E1 pulse out. The mesh on the door has holes. To a high frequency gamma ray induced spike, those holes look like open barn doors. And your ammo can. Unless you sanded the paint off the rim to create a perfect conductive seal, the lid is electrically insulated from the box. It's not a shield. It's just a metal bucket. The science. An EMP isn't just radio waves. It's a complex event with 3 components, E1, E2, and E3. E1, the fast spike. Nanoseconds, high voltage. This punches through semiconductors. It induces thousands of volts on tracks of circuit boards that are only millimeters long. This is what kills your laptop and your fancy modern radio. Skin depth and attenuation. To stop this, you need a continuous conductive shield. Aluminum foil can work, but only if the seams are folded perfectly to create a cold weld electrical seal. A microscopic gap is a slot antenna that lets the energy in. Grounding. Some people think grounding a Faraday cage helps. For EMP, grounding can actually be a liability, turning your shield into an antenna if the ground line itself picks up the pulse. The cage needs to be a floating sealed universe. The horror. The flash happens. The power lines arc and go dead. You wait a few hours. You go to your Faraday cage, an old ammunition crate with the rubber gasket still intact. You open it smiling, expecting to be the only man with a working radio. You pull out the radio, you turn it on, nothing. Why? Because the rubber gasket insulated the lid from the can. The E1 pulse traveled along the outside of the can, found the gap, coupled into the interior, and fried the sensitive MOSFETs in your receiver. You are holding a brick. You survive the apocalypse, but your preparation failed because you didn't understand electrical conductivity. The solution. The Matryoshka method, layering. Wrap the radio in a static bag, ESD bag. Then wrap that in 3 layers of heavy-duty foil, folding the seams over. Then put that inside a metal trash can with the lid taped down with metallic HVAC tape. Disconnect everything. An antenna plugged into a radio during an EMP is a lightning rod that funnels the death directly into the chip. Disconnect antennas, power cords, microphones. Isolate the unit completely. The trash can test. Put a Bluetooth speaker playing loud music inside your cage. Close it. If you can still hear it or connect to it with your phone, your cage leaks. If RF can get in, the EMP can get in. You have built the radios, you have tuned the antennas, you have hardened your gear against the pulse of a dying sun. You are sitting in your bunker, surrounded by the hum of cooling fans and the glow of amber screens. You are ready to talk to the world. The final delusion. You think the goal is to broadcast, to rebuild society, to be the voice of reason in the chaos, to play DJ to the apocalypse. The mockery. Nobody wants to hear your podcast, Survivor. Nobody cares about your political theories or your manifesto on why the world ended. In the silence of the aftermath, noise is aggression. If you broadcast, you are not a savior. You are spam. You are annoying the few professionals left who are trying to work, and you are attracting the predators who are looking for a meal. The science. The ultimate principle of survival communications is SIGINT, signal intelligence, versus COMINT, communications intelligence. COMINT is talking. It is a low values, high risk. SIGINT is listening. It is high value, zero risk. Information flows to the silent observer. The one who talks gives away intelligence, location, status, morale, resources. The one who listens gathers it. The horror. It is day 365. 1 year since the silence fell. The Baofeng warlords are all dead, located and liquidated by triangulation. The solar optimists froze to death when their batteries failed. The voice heroes were raided weeks ago. You were the last one left, not because you were the strongest, not because you had the most guns, but because you were the quietest. You watched the spectrum waterfall on your screen like a hawk watching a field. You saw the spikes of others dying. You learned from their mistakes without ever keying your mic. The solution. The only frequency you truly need to monitor is reality itself. The radio is just a tool to confirm what you already suspect. So here's the final instruction. Listen for 99 hours for every 1 second you transmit. Trust the physics, not the marketing. Be the black hole in the spectrum. Absorb everything, emit nothing. You are no longer a prepper. You are a radio operator. And in the land of the deaf, the one-eared man is king. But in the land of the blind, the man who stays silent is the only one who lives to see the dawn.